All right. Welcome to another episode of Southern Scrap Nation. I'm your host, Daniel Jonas. This is the weekly or bi weekly podcast. Today, we're going to do a pre fight breakdown, pretty much just a fight analysis of Khabib versus Tony Ferguson for the lightweight championship of the world. Well, it will be the lightweight championship of the world. Right now, technically, it's the interim, but according to Dana, as soon as the first punch is thrown, it's for the real belt. So we'll get into that. Go ahead and subscribe, write a review of the podcast, either here on iTunes, Spotify. You can go on Instagram at southernscrapnation.com, Twitter at southernscrap, and Facebook. We got a page up there now as well. You can also find us on Google Play for all those Android users out there. So let's go ahead and get started and go ahead and preface this with there's a couple of fight announcements that I want to get into because one of them I think is real. It's been going back like confirmed, not confirmed, or just like rumored. So the first one is Darren Till versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Liverpool main event. It's going back and forth with confirmed, not confirmed. So for right now, I'm pretty sure that's gonna be the main event. But the other one that is confirmed is Ponzinibbio versus Kamaru Usman in Chile for the main event. So welterweight division's getting a move on. Good to see those fights are being booked. All right. So as we all know, April 7th is fight day or fight night for Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. I don't know why I say it that way. I keep on saying it. It should be Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, but formalities. Anyway, this fight's super highly anticipated. They both have been scheduled to fight each other twice now. One's been pulled due to a weight cut issue, and the other one's been pulled due to a injury during camp. Both having late replacements. Third time's the charm, hopefully. We'll get into... Actually, I'm pretty sure this is the fourth time they've been trying to schedule. No, 2 times. Yeah, 2 times. Anyway, so what's interesting about this fight is the dominance of both these fighters, but they have yet to compete against each other, right? You have a guy that's 25-0, Khabib, not 25-0 in the UFC necessarily. He's just 25-0 in his career. He's only had about 4 or 5 fights in the UFC, and questionable on their level of competitor. He has fought some of the top competitors, but ones that people would think would give him a hard time, he has not fought due to being injured all the time. Being from that AKA camp, they all suffer from injury all the time. They, I guess, spar very, very hard and on a daily basis, so it doesn't really leave any room for healthy bodies, especially Khabib, who's competed and is a world champion in Sambo. Just that grappling sport for as long as he's been doing it since a child, and I will remind people, has also grappled bears. It tears it. There's a lot of wear and tear that comes from that. So then also sparring very, very hard with other guys that are definitely not in his weight class, i.e. Daniel Cormier, Luke Rockhold. Sometimes goes with Kane. I'm sure Kane doesn't go 100% with him, but he still at least trains with him. So, and from what Josh Thompson says, he's held his own. That's very impressive. I mean, you're talking about a light heavyweight, a heavyweight, and a middleweight. All guys that technically are much larger than he is. However, Khabib gets up there in weight during the offseason, and so does Tony. Let's not get it mixed up here. Just Khabib's had more of weight issues and not being prepared as well as Tony. Tony has that Bruce Lee mindset, that very martial art discipline mindset. No matter what, he'll do what he has to do, and his self-discipline and willpower is incredible. So I'll get into that a little later. So going on to why this fight's highly anticipated is because of, once again, their dominance in the UFC and in MMA. Now on Tony's side, he's riding an 11-fight win streak. Very unheard of. Max Holloway is the only one behind him. If not, they're on equal playing field. They're kind of the same, really. 145, 155, both have wings as back tattoos, and fighting styles not necessarily similar, but they switch stances, very unorthodox and free flowing. So kind of a fun thing there if you want to look at it that way. But why Tony's incredible is because he suffered a loss from Michael Johnson back in the day, and he's fought in the UFC for a while now. He's 31 years old, 32 years old. Actually, probably older, 34, I think. He won the Ultimate Fighting Championship on the Brock Lesnar versus Junior Dos Santos season, and he won it at welterweight, right? We always talk about how heavy Khabib is and the weight cutting, and wow, he gets so heavy. Well, Tony's actually won at welterweight. He's also competed against some of the, not necessarily best welterweights in the world, but he's competed against high-level welterweights. Ramsey Nijum's no, slouch, and he knocked him out in the tough finale. He won that tough finale. Once again, he knocked out a welterweight, right? So definitely has power in that weight class, and his boxing technique allows him to get the most out of his reach and use that power that he has. So that after losing to Michael Johnson, he kind of went on a roll, steamrolling through like Dana Castillo. He fought at Barbosa, Gleison Tebow, Abel Trujillo, just constantly getting better each fight, showing more and more tools. Went through Josh Thompson, Lando Venata, and just every time getting better, showing something different, being more and more versatile, really learning from that loss against Michael Johnson. Now, we all have to remember that losses don't mean the same thing that they do in boxing. Being undefeated in boxing is more prestigious than it is in MMA. If you have a loss in MMA, it's kind of expected. If you don't have a loss, it's a roller coaster, right? It's an up roller coaster if you don't have a loss. It's the best up roller coaster in the world. You're constantly winning. But if you want to analyze life as a roller coaster, well, it would be kind of a shitty one if it just kept going up and up and up and up. Eventually, it has to go down. And the more wins you rack up, the further that fall is, right? So you're looking at a guy, Khabib, with 25-0. That's what makes him special. Other than that, his style it's a very smashing, mauling style, yes. But it's not flashy. It's not like he knocks people out with one punch and, that's the way it is. Kind of like Conor or Rumble Johnson or all these guys that have that one-hitter quitter power, or kicks like Anthony Pettis, or something flashy, or has some sort of style like Sean O'Malley is been showing. No, he takes you down, mauls you, and then gets his hand raised. It's not it's crazy to watch, because it's crazy to watch people's faces succumb to that dominance. Another pro high-level athlete succumb to that dominance, but at the same time, Tony's definitely got a way more aesthetic and crazy style to watch, and more entertaining, if you will. But that 25-0 is what makes him special. And he's Russian, and he's wrestled bears. His dad's his coach. He comes from AKA. Just all these different little things make him better. He's pretty outspoken for being, from Dagestan. He's got a following. He wears the warrior afro thing. I don't know why they call him the Eagle. should be the bear. His fighting style is more of a mauling style. But a lot of people have been asking, who do you think is going to win? And that's the biggest question about this fight. Who is going to win? Because their styles match up so well together. And like I've spoken on the past podcast about, and if you refer to my sips and slips and the ones that I've teased this fight on, you got a guy who loves to fight, and then you got this competitor, you know, a guy that never loses, the 25-0, versus the guy who likes to go in there to just be the best fighter. You watch his training, he does everything to strengthen up his legs and elbows and makes his body a weapon, just like in the Book of Five Rings. The author, the name is escaping me right now. However, he talks about your body being armor, right? Your body has to be, you know, strong as well. And he takes that literally, right? He kicks steel pipes to make sure his shins are all calloused up and have the same density as a Muay Thai fighter, right? Make sure the same thing with his elbows. He does free-flowing movement with his striking, mixing with takedowns, and never forgetting his wrestling background in the past, but also including a bottom game such high level as Eddie Bravo's 10th Planet. So he's constantly evolving. And then you get a guy in Khabib, solid fundamentals, and his fundamentals are what win him fights, and they just smash through him. So with all this hype, who do I think is going to win? I personally think Tony Ferguson's going to take this fight. Now, it's not a very popular opinion, and that's fine. I don't expect it to be a very popular opinion, because Khabib's marketing himself to at least the average fan in a way where, yes, he versus Conor makes sense. 26-0 versus the king of the lightweight division. His mauling style of watch, and the highlights of this guy are very impressive to the point where you can clip them together and you can watch people's faces break on TV. Watching another fighter break is a very captivating moment, and if you can capture that, like when you watched Edson Barbosa, or the most famous one to me is the Abel Trujillo, where the third round he's just dumping Abel over and over, and Abel just looks at his corner, puts his hands up, and as he puts his hands up to show, like, I don't know what to do, there's nothing I can possibly do, Khabib takes him down again, slams him, returns him to the mat. And, you know, he's a highly ranked wrestler, or at least collegiate wrestler back in the day, right? So what he's doing to these guys, especially Rafael dos Anjos, just taking these guys, throwing them down, smashing them, breaking them, it makes it very captivating, because you want to see that happen to Conor. We saw a little bit happen to Chad Mendes, but then you always pair Conor up against these wrestlers, and he always smashes through them. And the beauty of Conor is that Floyd mentality where you kind of want him to lose, but when he wins and overcomes that, it's even more of a reason why he's a star. So it's like, give Conor the worst fight ever. And everyone just looks at Tony and goes, he just sticks his head up in the air. He's going to get knocked out. Move on with him. He's not worth the time. So then they look at the Khabib. Oh, Khabib's going to get in there. He's just like, who doesn't Khabib throw in the air? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Fair. Cool. I would love to see that fight. No lie. It's great. It makes sense. But so does Tony. Tony makes even more sense. Tony is the champion. Tony's trash talk isn't the greatest. I will say that. He is awkward. He doesn't come off as like, but he's a family man. Like you're trying to expect him to be Conor. Obviously Conor's a lightweight champion, so the parallel between the two, you want the new one to replace the one and be better than the old one. Okay, well, not everyone has the gift of the gab that Conor does, and he's such an anomaly. For example, it wouldn't be hard to get that kind of hate or love or make that build as it would be in like the middleweight or heavyweight division. Stipe doesn't talk shit. Robert Whittaker doesn't talk shit. So if you could go in there and just be a little bit clever, you're going to make a bigger splash. However, it's very hard to make a big splash against, the biggest money whale in the whole entire division. So when you get a guy like Tony and you try to cut clips of Tony talking shit next to Conor, it's like, oh, well, Conor's going to beat this guy's ass. But when you pair their two fighting clips together, no one wants to admit it, but Tony is the boogeyman. It's scary what he does to people. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Going back to Khabib's, trash talking and his ability to sell the fight. I mean, this whole fight's based around it's Khabib time, because he said that during a middle of the fight, and he talked shit to Michael Johnson during their fight, like, I deserve this. Give up, I deserve this, and he beats him, and he talks to Dana and says, I'm gonna smash your boy, talking about Conor, and he just, but it's almost become expected. Like in the last fight that he had against Edson, even Javier Mendez, his coach, was like, all right, go talk to Dana. No, that's great. It's cool to watch him talk shit in the middle of the fight, in a fight that he's already winning. But don't force it. Don't be his coach and be like, all right, now go talk shit to Dana. That's part of the game plan. If he beats Edson, for sure he's gonna fight Tony. There's no doubt. We all want to see the fight. You don't have to sell it even more. People want to see it. Don't become something that you're not. If he didn't plan on talking shit to Dana that fight, and he just wanted to go in there and smash, I mean, the name of the fight wasn't him talking shit. It was him smashing Edson. What everyone talked about after was him just mauling Edson the next day. But, however, I don't think we should just shut Tony out from this fight. And I know a lot of people aren't shutting him out from the fight. That's what makes it so entertaining and so, worth watching, or worth the hype about, is because if it was just another guy Khabib was going to smash, we wouldn't really be this hyped about it. We obviously know that Tony is the real deal because his win streak, he's got that belt around his waist. He's a proven vet in the sport, and what he does in the cage is awesome in every way. Eddie Alvarez, I guess, is the most violent, has the crown for the most violent man in the division. Fine, whatever. Or in the sport, whatever, fine. Took it from Justin Gaethje, whatever, fine. But when I get into why we should give Tony a chance, you got to understand the mentality of fighter that Khabib's stepping in the cage with, right? So the reasons why I'm going to give Tony a chance, and I'll go into the reasons why, and then I'll give a good reason, I'll devil advocate. I'll be a devil's advocate to myself. Because there is a chance that Khabib can win this fight. There's never not. These guys are so high level that what it really comes down to is who had a better day, or who's going to have a better night, right? It's so crazy how close this fight is on stats and on the ability of these two, that it really just comes down to, in those 25 minutes, who's feeling themselves. Because everything else, they're just numbers. They're just things I'm going to talk about. But on that day, we'll see, what really comes out from it. But I'm going to back up the reasons why I think we should put our money on Tony. So first off, he's the current champ. He's shown professionalism. He's shown the dedication it takes to get to where he is now. He didn't wait for fights. He constantly made weight, constantly tried to make fights happen. Obviously, he had that injury against Khabib the first time. And these are the most nail-biting 14 days of my life right now, hoping, just praying to the MMA gods that those cage doors close and those two guys are in there 2 weeks from now. So, he's a champ. You know, he's on an 11 fight winning streak. What more can I say? He's beat some of the best in the division. He's finished some of the best in the division. He's solidified himself as the top guy, and there's no one in that division that will not agree to that statement. They know who, I mean, 11 fights in a row that you've won, 10 fights in a row that you've won, and they're all televised. Like, people can watch that happen. It's not like Khabib's, yeah, he's 25-0, can't watch all 25 of those fights. Sorry to tell you guys. There's a couple of those fights that you're going to watch them and you're going to go, oh, well, that other guy doesn't even seem like he should be in there, right? It's that kind of idea where you watch 10 fights in a row Tony's fought against UFC caliber guys that he's beat. Not Bellator caliber. Well, some have been Bellator, but not like local promotion kind of guy. He's not on an 11 fight winning streak off of a local promotion. He's 11 fight winning streak of the top guys in the division. Yes, Khabib is 25-0. The idea of that 0 is very, very enticing to a fan, right? He's undefeated in MMA. That's unfathomable, or not fathomable, right? I hope I said that word right. It's crazy, and he continues to do it, so it's even more remarkable, if you will, because he continues to keep that O through the high-level division. But if you look at Khabib's record and fights, he's not even fought 10 times in the UFC. Tony's fought way more than 10 times in the UFC. He just has a 10-fight winning streak in it. Right? He's lost. He's competed on the Ultimate Fighter. So he's been with the promotion for so long and has been a vet of the sport. That experience matters in and under those big lights. Khabib doesn't really have that problem. He's very disciplined in that way, that very hard mentality that the Dagestanians carry. It's impressive. But that fighting under lights, all those kinds of things do matter. The weight cuts at that level obviously have affected him. There are different things that at that level it matters to be professional. And Tony's proven that. It matters to be professional. It matters to adapt and develop and evolve your skills. Because if you don't, you get left behind. And then you get these new guys, especially in the lightweight division. It's the most stacked division. It's the hardest division in all of MMA. Hands down. You got guys that can knock you out, that are fast, that are strong. It's so in the middle. You can argue that welterweight's almost that way, but then you get a little bit of the slower guys in welterweight. You have to be so athletically gifted to be at 155 and compete at a pro level that when you look at 155ers in day-to-day lives, I mean, they're probably the most fit people in the world, right? It's the hardest division, right? It's the hardest division in wrestling. It's the hardest division in MMA, by far. So there's no the 25-0 is definitely worth looking at, but I look at the most current line of work that you've been doing. I always look at the last fight that you've had. Both their last fights, there's nothing to complain about, and they're both their last fights. It's just that's what I look for. I look, back at their last fights. So when you give me a 25-0 record and I can't watch half of the 25, I start to count some of them out. I start to go, okay, cool. I'm sure he would have beaten them anyways. They're like Thomas Almeida had a record of 20-something, and then Cody Garbrandt, who had a record of like 9-0 at the time, just starched him in the first round. You can have a record of 21-0, but the whole thing was Cody Garbrandt's like he was fighting taxi cab drivers in Brazil. That's kind of the truth. You're just fighting those kinds of guys. There's a word for them. It's escaping me right now. But you're gonna win regardless. So I don't really count those. I count what he's done in the UFC. So this fight takes place, obviously, the big thing first. The weight cut, perfectly fine this time. Khabib's got a nutritionist. Tony's always done well with cutting weight. Right, good. We got the weight cut done. They do the stare downs, talk the shit that they talk. Their animosity is animosity. It's there. It's been there forever. It's going to continue to be there. Blah, 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 blah. Night of, step in the cage, door locks. Whoever the ref is gets in between and says, go. Fight starts standing. So let's talk about the striking of these two. So Khabib is a very aggressive fighter. He's aggressive in the sense of that Justin Gaethje don't take a step back. He's willing to take a step back. It's just that he just runs forward. Like, he just goes forward regardless of what the outcome is. He's just going to barrel forward, and then you kind of just have to react to it. Tony is also an aggressive fighter. He's an aggressive fighter that's a little bit more intelligent than that. He doesn't just barrel forward. He likes to take the center of the octagon, but he's willing to step backwards. As he likes to step backwards or move out of the way, it allows him to move out of the way of his opponent's shots, land that jab. So the thing about the jab that Tony is going to use in this fight, their reach is 6 inches difference. And if there's one thing that Tony Ferguson's very good at, it's using his reach. And when you have a 6-inch deficit at a guy that likes to barrel forward, at a guy with a 6-inch reach advantage, and like a lot of guys say, knows how to use his reach, it's going to be very, very hard, right, to just keep doing that constantly if you're getting peppered with the jab. Tony's ability to use kicks through the middle, it's like a snap kick, back push kick, instead of coming to the side, right? He will use leg kicks. He likes to switch stances, obviously. But they're all designed in a way to not get taken down off those kicks. Those kicks are specifically used to pierce the gut, hit the sternum, hit you in between breaths. He times it that way. The ones that come to the side are he uses them at a chopping motion, right? He'll maybe wait till your arms are up and then come underneath the ribs, trying to push the organs up, right? That's how you really hammer home a body shot. But the ones that he likes to use on the back foot are those teeps, the front jabs to the sternum, in between your breaths as you're moving forward when you're heavy. Tony's good with his footwork. He circles in and out. The switching of the stances constantly. That salsa dancing that he does, the awkward movements. So, actually, let me back up just a little bit. I'm going to go into the stats about these guys because there's something very interesting that I want to point out. So, when I looked at the stats of these guys, the very first thing that interests me was Khabib's striking percentage is higher than his takedown percentage. And obviously, it comes from ground strikes, but he's also scored the highest number of takedowns in a fight or in a round in the UFC. So, as much as he is known for his slams and his ability to take the fight to the ground, all the work he does is on the ground. All the work he does is with striking. Khabib's a striker. He's a ground striker. He stands up and strikes sometimes too. If he gets comfortable standing, he'll use it. He'll use it. His accuracy in striking is 50%. His defensive striking 70%. He does keep his chin tucked, his hands held high. He was very good at nullifying damage, as well as being on top. It's kind of hard to deal damage. His takedowns, defense is 83%. Doesn't really have anyone try to take him down. There was one fight that Gleison Tebow did stuff all of his takedowns, so take that into consideration. The accuracy of his takedowns are 45%. It's not that high. He uses a lot of chain takedowns, right? He uses a lot of double leg entries that are very sloppy, if I might add, to that body lock, and then that body lock is all work from there. So once he gets them, it's typically off of like one failed attempt. right? And his submission average, 0.45, right? He doesn't really submit a lot of people. He does finish people, yes, but he doesn't really, right? The finisher in this fight is Tony. Tony's the finisher. We go when we look at Tony, his striking, his takedown percentage are legitimately the same. It's equal. All right? There's no difference. 42% and 42%. His defense and striking's lower than Khabib. He doesn't take as much damage, but it's still pretty high. 64% striking defense. For those that, think he just absorbs all these strikes, right? He doesn't. His takedown defense, or his striking defense, obviously isn't like 80% or whatever, but it's not like 30%. He still is above, average. He's still above, that middle. It's still impressive. His takedown defense is 76%. He allows takedowns to happen sometimes, so it reflects that. But if he wants to, what you're seeing from these numbers, and I know they're just percentages, but no matter what it looks like Tony is doing, he still retains a higher percentage than the average fighter on all levels. He's exceptional in that way. Yeah, he's not the best wrestler in the world, but he's still a high-class wrestler. And if he wants to stuff your takedown, he'll stuff your takedown. If he doesn't, he won't. So it can bait you into a false sense of security. You look at his submission average, 1.6 is the submission average, right? He submits a lot. Compared to a guy who spends a lot of the time beating someone up on the floor and draining their will, you'd expect them to just be submitting people because they're just looking for a way out. Nope. Khabib only submits not even half of the time. Right. And a couple fun facts for you guys so you guys can understand a little bit more of the relation between these two. Tony's finished all of the same opponents that Khabib's faced. Gleison Tibau, except for RDA. Gleison Tibau, he submitted in the first round, hit him hard, had him rocked. Khabib couldn't even take him down. He submitted Abel Trejo. He submitted Edson Barbosa. And then RDA is the same fighter, and they didn't take him out, but Tony did take RDA to the 5th round in Mexico City and will still look like the fresher fighter after 5 rounds. Still look like he was ready to go for another 5 in Mexico City. Khabib went 3 rounds, dominated RDA, but it wasn't like it was just like he beat RDA. You know what I mean? There was at that point, and this was RDA at his prime. Like this was when RDA before he became champ. He did do work on him, but then Khabib took that time off because of the injuries. And the older you get doesn't necessarily mean the better you get, right? So the RDA or the Khabib that beat RDA is still not, his striking's better now, but it's more orthodox. It's more, he's got the fundamentals down now. He's not as wild with his striking, but it's pretty much the same fighter. And the only opponent that they have different on the record is Michael Johnson. You have the dominant win that Khabib took from Michael Johnson in New York versus Tony Ferguson's loss to Michael Johnson. But the Tony Ferguson, and I will relate, from before is not the same Tony Ferguson that is now. However, Tony is a little bit older. But he did learn from that fight, and that's why he's on the win streak that he is now. Both could fight at 170, but Tony's actually fought at 170 and has been successful. So everyone talking about the whole, Khabib is a big dude. Tony's a big dude and Ferguson's a big dude. Stop mentioning that they're big dudes. We get it. Pretty much everyone 155 is big. AKA already has experience fighting Tony. Josh Thompson and Tony went 3 rounds together, and so they actually have some hands-on experience that Josh Thompson can bring back to AKA, and has probably brought back because he is Khabib's coach. So, just a little bit of fun facts there on those guys. On the guys. So, going back to the striking. Being a pressure fighter, Tony's going to take advantage of that. He's dealt with pressure fighters before, and RDA is a perfect example. He is going to make investments early. He's one of those guys that he does make investments early. Khabib doesn't really... He headhunts and then goes for the takedown. He doesn't really care about body shots. Like, it's not his... He doesn't plan anything out. Tony makes investments. Especially for this fight, it's a 5-round fight. He's going to make those investments early. He's going to dig to the body, dig to the body, dig to the body. He's going to force Khabib to reach for the legs, reach. Keep on reaching for, something to grab onto. Every time that he gets close, he's going to jab him, use his footwork to switch stances and get out of the way. So, Khabib also being an unorthodox fighter and throwing punches from explosive stances against Martins. He loaded up an uppercut from an unorthodox from his hips and just like leveled him, right? Got on top and started elbowing. However, Tony's got a reach of 6 inches. That reach is going to keep him away from Khabib being able to just pop up and explode on him. He can use his footwork and his head movement to slide back away from something, or at least take away some of the damage. Tony's very good at rolling punches. The ability to roll a punch and be able to roll with it is high level. Nate Diaz, the Diaz brothers, Frankie Edgar. There are certain guys that, using specific boxing training, have learned how to do it. Connor's good at it too, right? Shoulders over, comes over the top like a viper. His are more like unorthodox ways. So, he's going to attack the legs. He's going to attack the body. He's going to chop it down, make the investments early, and jab the way. Eventually, once he starts feeling that rhythm, and he starts feeling his rhythm later on in the fight, you'll start seeing the funny stance switching and the elbows. The elbows will eventually come, right? He starts working his way inside. He starts timing them better, and then eventually spinning starts to happen. And then it becomes a blender. You start fighting a blender in there. He's jabbing you, spinning, elbowing you, kneeing you, kicking you, just starting to make it a blender inside the octagon. And the more rounds he has to make it happen, and the more that you try to survive and the more that you try to keep going, the faster the speed goes, the slower you get, and the more blades are added, or the more tools are added, right? So first starts off real slow, jabs, body shots, investments. Slowly you start feeling the leg kicks. You start feeling the shots to the body. Second round, maybe he starts adding crosses and hooks. Body keeps on going to the body, forces you to take him down. He stands back up, makes you work a little bit more. Da-da-da-da-da. Third round, he starts adding elbows from the bottom, from the top. He starts, but keeps on going back to the body, body. And then you'll see by the 4th, 5th round that he just spins, kicks, whatever the case may be. Anyway, so from there, he's going to force those takedowns. Those takedowns are going to come. Khabib's going to take Tony down. It's going to happen no matter what. It's the work that's going to be done on the ground. What Khabib has to look out for standing is the power of Tony from straight shots. It's going to be elbows that cause blood. I don't think Khabib's been cut in the octagon, but if he hasn't, he's going to get cut in this fight. That's a scary thing to think about, right? That's why Muay Thai is one of those sports where it's kind of hard for a normal person to just like conceive that someone would just go in there to take elbows and knees to the face at the power and ferocity that they do, because people get cut bad. And when you fight Tony, like, you just have to be ready to get cut, right? That's why no one wants to fight him. You just have to be ready to get elbowed in the face, because it's gonna happen. So Khabib's gonna have to use cage cutting in the best way possible. This is the way that Khabib's gonna win this, is to trap Tony. If you allow Tony to stand switch and move around the cage and make it his home, it's gonna be very hard to beat him. But if Khabib can somehow cage cut and use something to back him up, I don't know if it's going to be his power, his drive, whatever it's going to be, but he's got to keep Tony in this nice angular, like, right? If you're looking at it, Khabib's always going to want to keep him in between 2 points, right? He's going to keep that angle, and he can use that angle to use takedowns, keep it very boxed in, right? Not necessarily like like in the pocket range, but just constantly threatening takedowns, constantly threatening strikes, and never allowing Tony to circle out. So, once the takedown occurs, Khabib's takedowns are not going to come from a double leg. Tony's going to force him to use double legs. He's going to try to make him shoot from the outs, or like from in the middle of the octagon. He's going to force him to use those, like reaching double legs to close the distance. Khabib will close the distance using either strikes or just forcing it by running in. But Tony using his range can nullify that. Khabib typically keeps his head down for his takedowns, and so that's the perfect time for knees. And snap down. He's gonna snap Khabib down if he gets caught. If he gets caught with his head down, his arms extended, Tony being 6 inches away, 6 inches longer away than Khabib, is gonna be able to time a snap down, and then we'll get into the groundwork from there. So forcing that double leg is not necessarily a bad thing on Tony's part. I think it's the best option he has. Once Khabib gets a body lock, that's when people go for rides. And that's where the issue comes from, is the body lock, the work off the cage. If Khabib can force Tony onto the cage and do work from the cage, that's where I see the most issue for Tony, is takedowns from the cage, being pressed up against the cage, yada, yada, yada. Being held up against the cage. Being able to smother all of Tony's unorthodox movements and consolidate it to like one area. However, when the body lock happens, Tony's already shown, and Khabib's shown a weakness to this, but Tony's already shown his ability to do this against Josh Thompson, the coach of Khabib. He's shown his ability to Granby roll. For those that don't know what a Granby roll is, as soon as someone controls a body lock around the body, so both hands, you gable grip, this gable grip, monkey grip over the thumb, around the body, or S grip, depending on, whoever you are. Once he grabs that and starts to go for a ride, Tony will front roll over, but in an angle. He's not going to just like front roll through. He might, because there's the legs that he could go for. But typically rolls at an angle, putting both shoulders on the mat, and then stands back up. Tony's got that sporadic movement where he's constantly bouncing up and down, that if he gets the hold of the body lock, like let's say Tony turns his back through a spinning elbow or whatever, using the momentum, he's just going to roll through it, break the grip. Because if I try to hold on and someone's body literally like rolls through my arm, I'm forced to break that grip. So it's going to be up to Khabib to adjust midair. I'm sure Khabib, and he's shown his ability to adjust off that with the Abel Trujillo fight, but it still was a vulnerability in his control. Khabib's game is about controlled chaos, so the more that he can get his hands on you and control that chaos, the better it works for him. Tony's chaos is just everywhere. It's the scramble chaos. So if you can create that break from grips and then dive into that scramble, that's where you'll see the most work done. It's also very taxing on the guy that's trying to control. So Tony's, if he gets taken down, which he will get taken down, Tony's probably not gonna. It's gonna be not necessarily foreign to Khabib, but it's not gonna be normal. Tony's gonna invite the bottom game. So that whole immediately mode of needing to cage crawl and stand back up is not going to happen. Tony rarely uses the cage to stand back up. If you look at his fights, he rarely uses it, and I applaud him for that. It's one of the hardest things to do, but he somehow figures out a way, and through the scramble, he does. Whatever movements he makes, whatever sporadic movement he makes, it's to create space. And once he creates space, that's how he stands up. He doesn't stand up by shimmying over to the cage and then Keith Jardine, back walking up the cage like everyone trains for, because that's what Khabib wants you to do. He wants you to post. He can break the table. Once he breaks the table, he smash, passes, gets on top, smash, lets you try to stand back up, breaks the table, repeat. That's how he wins fights. That's how he breaks you. But Tony will allow the takedown to happen in open field, right? The open field keeps Khabib from trying to push your head against the fence and smash you that way. If Tony does get put up against the fence, he has the tendency to either use his feet to grab / roll over. Very veteran, not legal move, but it's like that veteran savvy he'll try to do. So he does his best to get away from the cage. But if Khabib can control it, push it all against the cage, and just do work on him from the cage, it's going to be very hard to, one, retain that guard, and then two, not, and then just play bottom. It's going to kind of force him to stand up that way. So Khabib's going to have to control him against the cage on the ground as well as standing, and just pretty much control that chaos that he's very good at, and then force him to use a game that Tony didn't want to, which is just the stand up, get back to your feet, get taken down game. And then for Tony, just keep space. Use the Granby rolls. The way that he's going to stop certain takedowns is switching the stances constantly. If you constantly switch stances and move your feet, it's very hard for someone to get a beat on when to shoot, right? And with that range, he can switch his stances freely without Khabib timing it. And the further out that he is, let's say Khabib wants to shoot and Tony's in the midst of transition, he's like, perfect time, I'm going to strike. Tony's range is long enough where he can just jab him from far away, or he can just bring up one of those knees, and he can see it happening before because of his ability, or the time that Khabib needs to close the distance. So with the switching of the stances, also, if he does get caught in a moment of transitioning through switching of stances or spinning or whatever, Tony's very good at just throwing up a submission. To break the rhythm of throwing up a submission, it's going to have to create space, right? Khabib likes to put his head right on the chest of his opponent and really use that wrestling pressure forward game. However, you can see in Tony's fights, such as the Kevin Lee fight, a heavy wrestling top game leads to a lot of mission control positions, elbows from the bottom, which I'll get into, and submission attempts. The more submission attempts happen, the more space Khabib needs to make to not allow it to happen, and the more space that's created, the more ability Tony has to get back to his feet and do more work. So, finally, the ground, where the fight really takes place. So, let's say once it hits the ground, what happens from here? Well, Khabib's ground game is super effective against guys that don't have a good bottom game. And not necessarily to say that they're not good at jiu-jitsu, not necessarily to say that they're not good at wrestling, not saying that. But none of those guys really that he's fought embrace the bottom game. Daryl Horcher did a very good job on the bottom. For a guy that not even a top-level UFC lightweight took fight on a couple of days' notice, did a very good job, not days, but weeks' notice, did a very good job dealing with that bottom game and retaining the guard and using the knee shields and using that jiu-jitsu bottom game one-on-one, attacking from the bottom a little bit. Obviously got smashed, but no offense to Daryl Horcher, but he's no Tony Ferguson. So, that being said, Tony's also submitted people off his back. It's very hard to do in MMA. If he's doing it at that level, then his ground game is 100% legit and way better than Daryl Horcher's. So, once it hits the ground, Khabib's going to look to control, smash, pass, smash, repeat, get to crucifix. The AKA guys love that crucifix position, love to smash. Kevin Lee took mount. Khabib might take mount. But when you watch Kevin Lee take mount, Tony Ferguson's constantly moving still in mount. He's never giving Kevin any time to work in mount. Kevin throws a couple shots at him, and then Tony stands back up. It's totally fine. He rolled punches. He didn't really take any clean. He did take some punches, but, you know, he's not going to just sit there and just absorb damage. Tony works. Tony works. That bottom attack is very, very important in this fight, and this is the reason why. In jiu-jitsu, if you are getting smashed on top, the person on top is barely working. But if you fight back, and when I train, if I'm on bottom, I'm constantly going for a submission. I'm constantly pushing on their hips. I'm constantly doing something. I'm constantly pulling them down. I'm constantly working. I get done. All I was doing was quote-unquote surviving. I was getting my guard back. I was letting them pass. I was throwing up submissions. They get done. They are breathing so heavy. And the reason why is because they're working, right? I'm making them think. I'm not letting them just sit there and lay on top of me and me just like do the same thing over again. I'm trying different things. Whatever creates space, whatever keeps them from being able to sit there, posture, and let's say I was sparring with gloves on, sit there, posture, and allow them to strike. If I move on the bottom, they can't strike, or they can't hit me clean, or they're worried if they do land, or if they do sit up to strike, that they're going to get swept. So constantly throwing up the submissions and constantly doing that will keep them thinking and will actually nullify some of that ground attack. Obviously, Khabib's on a different level of that, but I think Tony's bottom work is going to be good enough. So that's where the elbows come in. Tony's going to use the mission control, his long legs, and his submission attempts with triangles and stuff, and he's going to use it to cut Khabib. Tony cuts his opponents for this reason, and this is why he's the boogeyman. Ever felt blood? It's kind of sticky, right? Well, blood and water don't mix. It creates like it's like oil and water. Well, when you lock in a submission and your opponent's sweaty, but you've cut their face open with elbows, that blood kind of starts to take over for the sweat. So when submissions start getting put in place, such as a triangle choke or a Darce choke, it helps you stick to your opponent a lot better. So he uses it. And also, it's not easy to fight if you're cut from all angles. He submitted Barboza, and you can watch the snap down that he does. He pulls him in. He locks it up. And I think if he can cut Khabib, and this is what happens to me, I think if there's a finish, it's Tony, obviously, and I think this is the finish that happens. I think he puts the pressure on Khabib, outworks Khabib for 1 to 3 rounds. 4th round, you see Tony, and the cut opens up in the 3rd or 4th round, and you see Tony use that cut, time that takedown, use his range, snap in that Darce choke. I don't think Khabib's ever had a Darce threatened by a guy like Tony Ferguson, and I think once that cut happens, Tony's going to use it to finish. I don't think you see a triangle in this one. Maybe you do, but I think this one comes from a Darce choke. I think he takes advantage of Khabib's lack of posture in an American double leg takedown. You know, Tony's all American, right? Kevin Lee had great takedowns. Kevin Lee's takedowns are way better than Khabib's takedowns. But Khabib's shots are they're gonna get, once he gets tired and he starts getting outworked, they're gonna get even worse, right? If they're bad when he's good and ready, they're even worse when he's tired, I bet. So I think when the finish happens. So that's what I think. I think Tony takes it on this fight through a finish. If there is a decision, there's a chance that Tony could win, obviously. But a decision, you're probably going to get more of a Khabib decision on that one. That's because Khabib learned how to control the fight. Khabib doesn't finish fights, and he has a very hard time finishing. He didn't finish Darrell Horcher in the first round. He finished him in like the second round, right? And a guy at that level, he should have finished in the first round. But I think he just takes Tony to 5 rounds if he was to win, and it's just like a decision, like Khabib by controlled mauling. But I don't think it's that easy to control Tony Ferguson's chaos, and I think that's something that you can't prepare for. So pretty much the X factors on this is Tony's a finisher and Khabib's a pressure fighter, and I think they're both pressure fighters, but I think Tony's finishing rate is what's going to get him past. I think his ability to smell blood in the water is going to make it it's going to make it a very, very long night for Khabib. That pressure pass, that pressure style that Khabib has, he doesn't force the finish. Tony's like, once he starts smelling it, it's there. He's going to go for it. The outworking, the body work that Tony's going to do to the legs, to the body, I think that puts a lot of work on Khabib that he's not used to, and it tires him out. And that weight cut, he's probably not doing it the same way that Tony is, so he's probably going to try to invest in the body that way. Drain him. Tony movements also are going to be draining. It's going to force him to chase, to have failed takedown attempts, to move on the ground. It's just going to be outworking. And like I said, the switching of stances, the unorthodox rhythm, it's all gonna affect Khabib mentally, physically, in a way that he's not ready for. And in the places that Khabib thinks he's going to be strong, Tony's not going to be like that level of, he's not going to be that level that Khabib is, but it's going to be enough to stifle him and frustrate him and work him. And Tony's just going to get this late finish. He's going to chip him away, right? And then bloodying up Khabib. Khabib's never been bloodied up this way. It's going to be a first. 25 fights. See how you deal with it. So, everyone wonders what happens after this. Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor for the lightweight championship. Is that a fight that Conor wants? No. Is that a fight that the fans should want? Yeah. Is that a fight that I want? Yeah. Do I want it more than Khabib? For sure. Khabib's a cool fight, but everyone's like, oh, but this wrestler. Conor's style's built to beat wrestlers, right? He gives this false sense of security that he's not good at wrestling, but that's like his point. His point is like to make you think he sucks at fighting wrestlers, but he's like actually like that's his best style. People that have a low center that he can punch down on and get that angle, right? Who's the person that had the most struggle? He had the most struggle with Nate Diaz, a guy that doesn't wrestle at all. The reason why this fight, I think, is going to be more entertaining than the Khabib fight are a couple factors. First off, Tony is Nate Diaz 2.0. Tony has great boxing, uses his reach, is a taller fighter for the division, could fight at 170 if he wants to. But his variable in game, he has great bottom game. He submits people from his back, very good at triangles, lanky that way. But he shows more diversity in strikes. The elbows, the spinning stuff, the leg kicks, his wrestling pedigree is a lot higher. His snap downs, his counter wrestling, even his groundwork is more damaging than Nate's groundwork. All these different things make him a better fighter than Nate. We saw what happens when Conor fought Nate for the second time. He just exploited his weaknesses and won. Okay? So then you get Conor to fight a guy that he thinks he can just floor because he sticks his head up high. Well, then you get two unorthodox fighters banking on their fundamentals to win a fight where this fight could take place anywhere, right? Maybe Tony comes out and tries to wrestle Conor. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he tries to Minari roll on him and go for a leg lock. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he tries to snap him down, force him to box. Maybe he boxes with Conor. Maybe he goes Taekwondo strikes with Conor, back and forth. It's just, this is a fight between two martial artists, two fighters. Conor is a competitor, but he's lost, and he doesn't really care. He does care for the financial aspect of it, but Conor's a prize fighter. He's a fighter. He appreciates the body movement. He appreciates the discipline, the mental capacity it takes to be a warrior in that sense. Khabib's a competitor. He's a wrestler. He's a sambo fighter. Conor can fight any of those guys anytime, and yes, the hype is built, but the fight is as so. The fight is Conor beating the competitor because Conor is more of the martial artist and understands the angles and the rhythm and can exploit where people are exploit the weaknesses, right? And Khabib's has such a strength that he also has a lot of weaknesses that Conor's just gonna pick at, and then you're gonna realize he has, and you're gonna be like, oh shit, well, never mind. Whereas Tony, you look at him and you go, oh, doesn't really have any weaknesses. He's to the point where he's just trying new shit. Like, if his fundamentals are so not necessarily solid, but they're so adaptable, and he just makes the best of any situation, that he just tries whatever. His wrestling and his take, or his ability to fight on his back, he doesn't care about the takedown. So it freed up his striking, and now his striking's to a point where he's trying to incorporate all three things together: takedown, groundwork, and striking. I think it's unorthodox versus unorthodox, fighter versus fighter. I think it's a more compelling fight to watch. The lead up, yes, I get it. The hyping of it's very hard to do. But thanks to people like me, I can put it down on paper and show you guys why it's definitely worth watching and worth rooting for Tony to win, to unify this belt. All right? Tony's also from the United States, guys. Let's all root for the United States guy and not the guy from Russia. Fuck, why is everyone rooting for Khabib? Tony's our guy. Tony's from the States, right? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Once again, shout out to Charlotte Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Shout out to the UFC gym. Shout out to everyone, all the supporters, fans. And I just want to say thank you guys. I know this podcast, or this specific fight, has been asked for me to do a breakdown of, and here you go. We're an hour into it, and I hope this was all that I could get, or all that you guys could get. I hope it bored you guys with it to the point where it's enough information. We want to see the fight now, because that's where I am now. I just want to see it. So what comes after this is, this week I'll do another breakdown of Rose versus Joanna. Do another in-depth breakdown like I did for this one. Go about what happens. This fight's a lot more compelling than the first time they fought because of the outcome of what happened the first time. But all I can really tell you for this, before I get into a real deep breakdown, is before I was saying, man, I'd hate to be the girl to fight Joanna after her loss to Rose. Well, Rose is the girl that she's fighting, so we'll see. Both girls are phenomenal, and I'll get into a good breakdown. And I got a lot of, there's stuff that we can talk about from it, even though the first fight didn't last that long. So, hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. Once again, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at southernscrapnation.com, and look for us on the iTunes podcast, Spotify, and Google Play, as well as the YouTube channel. All right, guys, look forward to talking to you and breaking some stuff down for you again. We'll be back here on Wednesday for a Sips and Slips episode, and give you all the MMA breakdown news and keep on hyping you guys up for UFC 223. All right, guys.